The Alpha King locked down the entire stronghold. Every gate sealed, every guard mobilized, every corridor cleared, because the Omega girl heard growling behind her and smiled. Not a frightened smile, not a frozen, managing terror smile. A real one. Warm and delighted, like she'd just found something wonderful. Alpha King Bren Ashvale watched it happen on the security feed with his heart in his throat, because what was growling at her was his son. Mira had been an apprentice herbalist in the Ironmark stronghold for exactly 3 weeks. She was 22 years old. Omega rank. No pack bond. No family name worth recording. In no particular reason the court would have noticed her at all, except that she was quietly excellent at what she did, the kind of excellent that expressed itself in full supply rooms and well-organized drying racks and medicinal preparations that were ready before anyone thought to ask for them. She kept to herself, ate in the lower hall, said good morning to the guards she passed and meant it, learned the stronghold's rhythms the way careful people learn unfamiliar territory, by watching, by listening, by paying attention to things that other people had stopped noticing because they'd been there too long. She had not yet learned about the cub situation. No one had told her, which was a significant oversight, and one that several people would spend considerable time being guilty about afterward. So on the morning of the incident, Emira was doing what she did every morning, collecting dried herbs from the East Corridor storage alcoves, her basket over her arm, her mind on the day's preparation schedule, when she heard the growl behind her. She stopped. She turned around. Cale Ashvile was 4 years old, which, in the Ironmark bloodline, meant he was already large for his age, already showing the broad shoulder set that his father carried, already possessed of a genuine physical presence that made grown guards instinctively reassess their proximity. His claws were already capable of splitting oak bark. His teeth were already set with the adult configuration. He had, just last week, produced a practice growl that caused 2 senior pack members to take an involuntary step backward, which had been added to what was apparently an extensive behavioral report. He was crouched in full display posture, chest forward, claws extended, every inch of him committed to the performance of dominance, and he was growling at Mira with everything he had. Mira looked at him for a long moment, and smiled, not in fear. Not in that fixed, careful way that people smiled at things they were afraid of, and trying not to show it. She genuinely, warmly, delightedly smiled, the way you smile when you have just discovered something that pleases you unexpectedly. "Oh," she said, "you're practicing." Cale's growl faltered, his head tilted, just slightly. The display posture held, but something in his eyes shifted. The specific confusion of a creature whose carefully constructed performance has just received a completely unexpected response and doesn't know what to do with it. "That is so good," Mira continued. She crouched to his level, unhurried, easy, her herb basket set aside on the corridor floor. Her hands were open. Her posture was low and relaxed, every line of her communicating that she was not a threat and was not treating him as one. "You're working really hard on that, aren't you? I could feel it." Cale stared at her. In 4 years of life, 4 years of guards stepping back and senior packmates going into defensive posture, and his parents maintaining their careful, protocol-appropriate distance, not one single person had responded to his display with that word. Practicing, not threatening, not dangerous, not a behavioral concern requiring management and increased containment protocols. Practicing. Like it was something he was learning, like it was something worth noticing, like he was doing it on purpose and someone had finally seen the purpose. His claws, which could split oak bark, stayed exactly where they were. He did not advance. 7 sections away, in the Stronghold's security command center, Alpha King Bren Ashvale watched his son's display posture fail to produce the expected result and felt his heart do something complicated. He had already called the lockdown. "All pack personnel, emergency seal protocol," he'd said the moment the feed showed Cale in display posture with a civilian Omega at close range. "Section 4, East Corridor. Non-contact response. We have a situation. Unbonded Omega. Direct proximity to the royal heir in active threat display. The guard captain had responded immediately. 40 seconds ETA. Non-lethal containment. Standard protocol for exactly this scenario. Iki. And then Mira had smiled. And Bren had watched his son's carefully constructed display posture falter like a candle in wind. "Sir," his second said slowly, watching the same feed, "the heir is standing down." "I can see that," Bren said. He's just standing there, sir. Looking at her." "I can see that too." The second was quiet for a moment. What is she doing? What Mira was doing on the feed was reaching into her herb basket and producing a small piece of honeycomb she'd apparently been saving. She held it out on an open palm, the specific open palm gesture that meant no weapons, no threat, and said something the audio pickup caught clearly. "I don't know if you like this, but I think you deserve something for practicing so hard." Kale stared at the honeycomb, then at her, then at the honeycomb again. He took it, with the tips of his teeth, with a care and deliberateness that Bren had never in 4 years seen his son apply to anything, and backed up 2 steps, and sat down. Bren's mate, Solara, burst through the security center door breathing hard. She had been 3 sections away when the lockdown sounded and had run the whole way. Her face was pale with the specific fear of a mother who has been told her child is in a dangerous situation and hasn't yet been told how dangerous. She saw the feed. She stopped. "He's sitting down," she said. "Yes," Bren said. "Kyle is sitting down." "Yes." "He hasn't sat voluntarily in front of anyone in 4 months," Solara said. "He growled at the pack physician last week. He charged the East Gate guards on 3 separate occasions. She stopped. On screen, Ishale finished the honeycomb and looked at Mira with an expression that Solara, across 7 sections and a security feed, immediately recognized. "He wants more," she said. "Yes," Bren said. "Of the honeycomb?" "I think," Bren said carefully, "of all of it." Mira was talking to his son the way she apparently talked to everyone, in the unhurried, present, genuinely interested way of someone for whom other people were not a performance to be managed, but simply people worth paying attention to. She talked about the herb basket, about the difference between dried lavender and fresh, and why it mattered for what you were using it for. She talked about the East Garden, and the way the morning light hit the southernmost beds, and whether Kyle had ever been in the East Garden because she thought he might like it there. Kale had not moved from his sitting position. His tail, which had been rigid with aggressive intent when the display began, was doing something Bren had to look at twice to be certain he was seeing correctly. It was moving, slowly, in small, pleased waves. "Cancel the lockdown," Bren said. "Sir," the guard captain said through the comm. "The heir—" "He's sitting down and his tail is wagging," Bren said. "Cancel the lockdown. Maintain positions, but do not engage. No one moves in that corridor until I say so." A pause. "Understood, sir." Solara was watching the feed with both hands over her mouth. "Kyle, when was the last time his tail did that?" Bren couldn't answer. He was watching Mira produce a small length of cord from her basket, something she'd probably use to tie herb bundles, and dangle it above Kale with the easy, unself-conscious attention of someone who had done this kind of thing before. Kale's eyes locked onto it instantly. Every hunting instinct in him engaged. Bren could see it. The shift from relaxed to focused. The weight transferring forward. The absolute attention of a young predator tracking moving prey. And then he pounced. With his claws fully sheathed, he caught the cord and looked at Mira immediately. Looked at her the way cubs looked at the person whose opinion mattered most. The specific bright-eyed check that said, "Did you see? Did I do well?" "Got it," Mira said warmly. "You're so fast." Kyle's whole body wriggled. Solara made a sound that Bren had never heard from his mate before, something soft and broken and overwhelmed, and reached for his hand. "That's our son," she said. Kyle, look at him. That's our son." "I know," Bren said. His voice came out rougher than he intended. When was the last time he looked like that? He couldn't answer that either. He went down himself. He left the security center and walked 3 sections through a stronghold that was in the process of standing down from lockdown, past guards who stood a little straighter when they saw him, and then looked slightly confused when they saw where he was going, and in what manner. Not the Alpha King's formal stride, not the command bearing that he wore in every corridor of his own stronghold automatically, but something quieter, something uncertain. He turned the corner into the east corridor. Mira was still on the floor, cross-legged, her herb basket beside her, her cord abandoned in Kale's possession. His son was pressed against her side with his eyes half closed, making a sound that Bren had to take a moment to identify, because he had heard it so rarely. A contented sound. The deep, quiet rumble that pack wolves made when they were completely, absolutely at ease with where they were and who they were with. Mira looked up when she heard Bren's footsteps. She didn't scramble to her feet, didn't arrange herself into a more formal posture. She simply looked at him with the same clear, direct attention she'd apparently given his son, and waited. "He's wonderful," she said. Bren looked at Kale, who had opened his eyes when Bren arrived and was watching his father with bright, curious attention. No display posture, no growl, no automatic defensive response. Just looking. "He has been," Bren said, choosing the words carefully, "a significant behavioral concern for 4 months. Aggressive display postures, charging the guard rotation. He has cornered senior pack members on multiple occasions." "I know," Mira said. "I found the incident reports in the new staff briefing. All 14 of them." "Then you know what you were standing in front of." "I know what everyone else saw," she said. "I saw something different." "What did you see?" She looked at Kale for a moment before she answered. "A cub," she said, "who has been trying very hard to get someone's attention. And every single time he tried, everyone backed away, or more guards arrived, or a new protocol was implemented. Which I understand why, from a safety perspective. But from his perspective," she stopped. "From his perspective, the louder he got, the more distance appeared. And the more distance appeared, the louder he needed to get. And no one ever asked why he was loud in the first place." "Why was he loud?" Bren said. She held his gaze steadily. "Because he's lonely," she said. "Because he's 4 years old and he's been treated like a threat to be managed since before he could walk. And somewhere in him he still knows that's not what he's supposed to be. He's supposed to be someone's child. He's supposed to have someone who scratches behind his ears and tells him he did well and plays with him. And he's been screaming that in the only language he thought anyone would notice, and no one noticed what he was actually saying." The east corridor was very quiet. Bren sat down on the stone floor. It was not a dignified act. What he was in full command armor, and the Alpha King did not sit on the floor of his own corridors. But he sat, because his legs had made that decision before he fully consulted his authority or his dignity. And he extended his hand the way he had watched Mira do it. Open. Still. Patient. Waiting. Kale looked at his father's hand. Then at Mira. She gave the smallest nod, and Kale pressed his head into his father's palm. Bren's throat closed. He had been close enough to feel his son's warmth exactly twice in 4 years. Both times in emergency medical situations with a pack physician present and full containment protocols in place. He felt it now. The specific warmth of a small body that had decided to trust. The weight of a head that was choosing to rest rather than brace. "He's soft," Bren said. Oh, his voice did not come out the way he intended it to. "Of course he is," Mira said. "He's 4 years old." Solara came down 20 minutes later. She stood at the corridor entrance for a moment, looking at her mate on the floor, her son pressed against the Omega Herbalist's side, the scene so utterly unlike anything the Ironmark Stronghold's east corridor had ever contained. And then she walked forward and sat down with them. Neither she nor Bren spoke. Mira looked at Solara, read whatever was on her face with that quiet, observant attention. "He kept looking toward the door," Mira said. "Every time I saw his ears orient toward the west, I think he was checking whether anyone was coming. Not guards. I think he was checking whether you were coming." Solara looked at her son. Kale's eyes were open now, watching his mother with that same bright attention he'd given his father, waiting to see what she would do with the proximity, waiting to see if she would step back. Solara reached out, slowly, placed her hand on the side of Kyle's face. He went very still. Then he leaned into it. Solara made a sound that she would probably prefer not to have been recorded on the security feed, but that the security feed recorded nonetheless. "How long?" she said very quietly. "Has he been wanting this?" "From the beginning, I'd guess," Mira said. "They usually do." "We maintained distance for his safety," Bren said. "For our safety. The protocols." "I know," Mira said. She was not arguing, not accusing. Her voice was careful and kind, the voice of someone who understood that the people in front of her had been doing their best with what they knew. "I'm not saying the protocols were wrong for what you understood. I'm just saying that what you understood might have been incomplete." "What do you understand that we don't?" Bren said. "My mother ran a sanctuary for orphaned pack cubs when I was growing up," Mira said, "before she died. I grew up watching her take in young wolves who had been separated from their families, sometimes hours old, sometimes months. All of them arrived doing exactly what Kale has been doing. Growling, charging. Threat display after threat display. And," Solara said. "And every single one of them stopped," Mira said. "When someone stopped responding to the display and started responding to what was underneath it." Kale had moved his head from his mother's hand to Bren's arm. He was now lying partly across both of them with the magnificent unself-consciousness of a very young creature who has found the place it was supposed to be and sees no reason to be subtle about it. Bren looked at the security camera at the end of the corridor. He thought about 14 behavioral incident reports. He thought about the pack physician's last formal assessment. Juvenile heir continues to display escalating dominance behaviors. Recommend increased containment and continued distance management approach, pending maturity. He thought about his son's tail, moving in small, pleased waves when Mira dangled a piece of cord. "What do we do now?" he said. "Play with him," Mira said. "Scratch behind his ears. Tell him when he does something well. Let him practice the growl, and then tell him it's very good and very brave. It's because it is. He's learning, and learning is brave, and he needs to hear that." "That's it?" "That's most of it," she said. "The rest is just showing up, consistently. So he knows that when he makes a sound, someone answers." Word traveled through the Ironmark stronghold the way word always traveled through enclosed communities, fast, mutated slightly at every telling, arriving in each new location with a slightly different emphasis. By mid-morning, the version in the lower kitchens was that the Omega herbalist had tamed the royal heir with a piece of honeycomb. By midday, the version in the guard barracks was that she had established herself as his primary caretaker, through some kind of Omega-specific pack bond ability that no one could quite explain. By evening, so the version circulating among the senior staff was something closer to the truth. A young woman with no rank and no particular reason to stop had stopped, had seen past what everyone else was seeing, and had in approximately 40 minutes changed everything. The Pack Council's family liaison sent a formal request for a meeting. The Stronghold's head physician sent a less formal request that arrived directly on Mira's personal comm and said, in its entirety, "Please come see me at your earliest convenience. I have been wrong about several things, and I believe you know what they are." 4 other families in the Stronghold, with young cubs who had been classified as behavioral concerns, sent requests through various intermediaries, all of which amounted to the same question. Could she help? Emira stared at the pile of correspondence and then at Kyle, who had appointed himself her shadow for the day and was currently sitting outside the herb drying room, watching her through the doorway with focused, happy attention. "I just gave you honeycomb," she told him. He produced a small practice growl. It was getting better. There was more resonance in it than this morning. She'd been praising the resonance specifically, and he was leaning into the feedback. "Very good," she said. "Much scarier than earlier. Keep working on it." His tail moved. She turned back to the correspondence and sighed. Bren found her in the East Garden at dusk. She was doing what she'd been doing when this all started, working with her herbs, sorting and checking and preparing, the quiet, useful work of someone who genuinely loved what they did. Kale was asleep at her feet, his breathing the slow, deep breathing of a cub who has had a full and satisfying day and has decided that this is an acceptable place to end it. Bren sat beside her without asking permission. He had been doing this. He noticed it himself. The absence of his usual formal performance. The way her presence apparently made his authority feel less like a thing he needed to wear constantly. She didn't react to his presence with the particular alertness that most people showed when the Alpha King sat near them unexpectedly. She just continued working. 12 families, he said. I know. I counted. That's how many have cubs currently under behavioral management protocols. I know, she said. Your pack physician sent me the summary. He was very thorough and appropriately embarrassed. Will you help them? She was quiet for a moment, her hands still moving through the dried herb bundles. I'm an apprentice herbalist, she said. Not a cub specialist. Not a pack counselor. Not anyone with a formal qualification to tell 12 families how to raise their children. You told us, Bren said. You needed it badly enough that I didn't have time to wonder if I was qualified. He almost smiled. And the 12 families? Also need it badly enough, apparently. She set down the herbs. I'll do what I can. But I want it understood that I am making it up as I go, based on what my mother taught me, and what I saw in the sanctuary. I'm not an authority. I'm just someone who paid attention. That, Bren said, is more than most people manage. She looked at him. He held her gaze. The full weight of it. The thing he'd been doing less and less carefully since she'd smiled at his son in the east corridor and cracked open something in the stronghold that he hadn't known was waiting to be cracked. What do you want? He said. Formally, from the stronghold. Name it. A proper herb garden, she said immediately. The current one is badly organized, and the light is wrong in the north beds. I've been making notes. Done. Full access to the medical stores for cub care preparations. There are several things I want to start making regularly, and I don't want to justify the request to Austin every time. Also done. And a formal position, she said. Not just apprentice. Something with actual standing so that when I tell a senior pack member their approach to their cub is causing the problem, they can't dismiss it because I'm an Omega with no rank. Bren was quiet for a moment. What would you call it? She considered. Pack cub liaison. I want it in writing, I want it recognized by the council, and I want the authority it implies to be real rather than ceremonial. Done, he said. All of it. Today. She looked at him with the specific expression of someone who had asked for what they needed, and is slightly surprised by the lack of negotiation. You agreed to all of that very quickly, she said. I had already decided all of it before you asked, he said. I was waiting to hear what you would say. Why? He looked at Kale, asleep at her feet in the garden dusk. At his son, who had spent 4 months being managed as a threat, and one afternoon being seen as a child. Because the people who are right about the things that matter most, he said quietly, are usually the ones who ask for what they actually need, rather than what they think they're allowed to want. She was quiet for a moment. That's a very specific thing to know, she said. I've been the Alpha King for 8 years, he said. You learn to distinguish them. The garden was warm in the late light, the last of the sun catching the herbs she'd spent the afternoon sorting. Kale's breathing steady and peaceful at her feet, the stronghold settling into its evening rhythms around them. Bren, she said. It was the first time she'd used his name rather than his title. He didn't correct her. Tomorrow morning, she said, bring Solara to the East Garden. I'll be there with Kale at the 7th bell. I want to show you both the cord game properly. There's a version where he practices claw control that I want to teach you, so you can do it without me there. You should be able to do it yourselves. All right, he said. You're going to feel awkward at first, she said. You're not going to know how to be natural about it. That's fine. He doesn't need you to be perfect. He needs you to keep showing up. We will, he said. Every day, she said. Not when it's convenient. Every day. Every day, he agreed. She looked at him for a moment longer. the alpha king of the Ironmark pack, sitting in her garden in the fading light, making promises to an Omega herbalist about showing up every day. And then she looked back at her herbs. "Good," she said. Kale stirred, opened one eye, saw his father, made the small, contented sound. And Bren reached down, the way she'd shown him, and scratched behind his son's ears. "Good boy," he said, a little awkwardly, a little uncertain, a little unpracticed. Kale's tail moved. Mira said nothing, but something in the corner of her mouth did. They came at the 7th bell. Both of them, together, without the guard detail that usually accompanied any Alpha King movement through the stronghold. Just Bren and Sylara, in the east garden, in the morning light. Kale was already there. He had been there since the 6th bell, sitting beside Mira's herb beds, with the proprietary air of a cub, who has decided that this garden and this person belong to him in some fundamental sense that he doesn't feel needs explaining. When he saw his parents, he stood. He looked at them for a moment, the way he'd been doing it all day yesterday, such that bright, waiting, wanting look, checking whether this was real, whether the distance was coming back. Sylara crouched down, extended her hand. "Good morning," she said. Her voice was not entirely steady. "I've been practicing." Kale's tail began its slow, pleased movement. He pressed his head into her hand. Mira watched from the south bed where she was already working, and said nothing, and smiled to herself at the herbs she was sorting. The east garden filled with the sound of a family learning, slowly and imperfectly, to be one. Outside the garden walls, the Ironmark stronghold went about its morning business, the guard rotation, the kitchen fires, the formal correspondence, the 12 families who were waiting for appointments, the pack physician who had rewritten 3 behavioral protocol documents overnight, the council liaison who was drafting the formal recognition of a new position called Pack Cub Liaison, and trying to find language equal to what it actually meant. Inside the garden walls, a cub practiced his growl. His mother told him it was very fierce. His father told him he was doing well. And an Omega herbalist with dirt on her hands and a basket of dried lavender kept working, and kept listening, and felt something that had been very quiet inside her for a very long time begin, slowly, carefully in the good morning light, to make a sound of its own. She heard growling behind her, and she recognized it for what it was. Not a threat. A cub practicing to be brave, hoping that this time, finally, someone would turn around. Someone did, and everything that followed began with that.